Welcome to Life-Changing Challengers, the podcast where passion meets purpose. I'm Brad Minus, your host, guiding you through stories of transformation and triumph, from endurance feats to overcoming adversity. Our guests defy the limits and inspire action. Ready to ignite your desire and incinerate your barriers? Join us. Your journey to the extraordinary begins now. And welcome back to another episode of Life-Changing Challengers. This is going to be an epic episode, ladies and gentlemen. Today, I have with me Holly Francis. She is an author and a speaker and a certified trainer, but her story is going to inspire you. It might, let's just put it this way, it's going to be incredible. So, how are you doing today, Holly? Everything all right?
I'm doing really good. Yeah, I'm in Edmonton, Canada. Here, it's finally really, really beautiful out and sunny, and summer is on its way. So I'm feeling great today.
Oh, love Edmonton. I'm in Tampa, Florida. So all the way down south of you, all the way across our country and yours. So yeah, so Edmonton used to be the world championships for ITU triathlon. And that's what I do, is I'm an endurance coach. So, you know what I mean? But, you know, that's the way that this has been brought out, as ways of getting through adversity and trauma and all that with uncommon ways. So that's how I've helped with a lot of my own clients. So that's how that came about. So, Holly, this is the first question I give to everybody. Can you tell us a little bit about your childhood, where you grew up, what was the complement of your family, and what was the environment like?
Yeah, so I grew up in a small town called Drayton Valley. It's about an hour and a half from Edmonton. I think like less than 8,000 people there. It's a very small town. My parents, I would come from a family of 3 kids, youngest. I was a baby, definitely a little spoiled, being the only girl in the family, 2 older brothers. My parents divorced actually when I was about 3 years old. But I am blessed to have such amazing and supportive parents, and they really instilled in us that we were still a family, and we did a lot of activities still together. And my family, both parents were very involved. So even though I come from a broken home, it didn't feel like that. And I felt so supported and loved. And I think because of that, I grew up just with this attitude that I can do anything that I want because I had that support. So I attribute that to my parents and my childhood and having that positive upbringing, to be able to always look at things very differently. Everything happens for a reason. That's how I see things. And I think that has always helped me as I grew up and as I went through challenges as I got older.
So what was high school like for you in Edmonton?
So I was in Drayton Valley still at the time.
Drayton Valley.
So Drayton Valley was a small town, and I knew that a small town wasn't for me. I knew that I wanted to get out of there one day, but didn't really know what I wanted to do. High school was great. I had a lot of friends. I did a lot of activities and just kept really busy. I was very outgoing, very happy-go-lucky just type of girl, but didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. I moved to Edmonton when I was 18 years old, met my then husband at the time, and proceeded to, just go through the motions of, okay, next is we get married and next we have babies, and just kind of had my whole life planned. It was just like this thing that I had set up for my life, and I knew what I wanted, and I just went after it. I got into a career working in human resources, and I was just really excited once I got married and then had my daughter, and I just felt like my whole life was kind of ahead of me. I was just really excited.
All right. Well, I've seen it on your website, and we're going to have that in the show notes. And I've seen what you've done and how you were before. And yeah, it looked like you were very happy growing up like that. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are just about to dive in. So you had a little girl, and name was Casey, right?
Yes.
Was it January of 2011?
Yep. So Casey was born on January 26th of 2011. Obviously, my first child. It was so exciting. I had a wonderful pregnancy, and we were just so excited for her to be born. She was the first baby on both sides of the family, or the first grandbaby. Yeah. So it was just such an exciting time. I was also kind of one of the first of my friend group to have a baby. So it was just all new and so exciting. And when I was growing up, even though I came from a divorced family, I knew that I wanted a family so badly and I wanted kids and I wanted to be a mom. So when I had my daughter, it truly felt like everything was finally complete. It felt like I had everything that I'd wanted. My daughter was born. She was 100% healthy. And I just felt so blessed and so happy. And I remember during those first few weeks being in awe of how perfect everything was going. And I remember almost feeling like guilty, like, oh, this is how life is? Is this how perfect life is? And I had no idea that just a few weeks later, my life would drastically change forever.
So you came down with Guillain-Barre Syndrome, correct?
Yeah.
Which is the autoimmune that actually attacks the nervous system, correct?
Correct.
All right. So before we get into the thick of that, where did you start? What did you start feeling? And how did you start, where did the symptoms originate?
So I was at home. Casey would have been 3 weeks old, and I was still adjusting to life as a new mom. And I was breastfeeding and no people were coming over because my house was a mess. And I was like up all night and exhausted and loving every minute of it, but exhausted. I remember that day. I remember sitting on the couch and I had Casey in my arms and I felt like this kind of tingle in my fingertip. That was the very first symptom. And at the time, I obviously didn't realize that till months later. But looking back, now I know that was my first symptom. So this was around actually noon. And I remember thinking, that's really weird. Like I've got this weird tingle in my finger. And I thought maybe I had burned myself because it was kind of like numb, but I didn't recall burning myself on anything. So I just kind of ignored it and I went about my day. Probably about 4 hours later, I was walking up the stairs and I remember feeling really tired and drained and thinking like, oh, it's a little bit harder to lift my legs to get up these stairs today. And that's kind of a weird feeling. But again, I was thinking, you know what? You haven't slept much. You're a brand new mom. I did have a C-section with my daughter, so I was recovering from surgery. And so it was like, okay, no, this is fine. You'll be fine. You're just tired. So I just ignored it. I got this pain in my neck. And this was within like an hour of the kind of weakness happening. And the pain kind of started as pretty mild. And then within minutes, like I'm talking like 5, 10, 15 minutes, it went from mild to severe. So I took some Advil and I'm like, what the heck did I do? Did I pinch a nerve or something? Like, I just don't get what I did all of a sudden. Like, it just came on so suddenly. And of course, after like an hour, the pain was still there, even though I had taken like 2, 3 Advils, was not helping at all. It just seemed to be getting worse, but I just tried to ignore it. Eventually, it was bedtime and I was like, hey, I'm going to put Casey to bed. And I'm going to go to sleep. I'm going to try to get a good night's sleep because I'm just not feeling well. Like I'm just feeling kind of weak and tired. So I went to bed that night. I tucked Casey in her little bassinet beside my bed and I lay down and I cannot sleep. There's no way I could sleep. I'm in so much pain from my neck. So I'm online. Of course, this is like when Google first came out on our smartphones, right? And so I'm Googling things online and I'm on WebMD, like, do I have a pinched nerve? Why is my neck hurting so bad? And why are my legs weak? And it says, yes, you have a pinched nerve. That's what it said. So I'm like, okay, what can I do to alleviate this pain? So it's telling me all these stretches. So I get out of bed and I'm doing all these different neck stretches and yoga poses. None of it is helping. To the point where I'm in tears and I'm literally crying and I'm thinking like, I can't do this. And I don't want to wake up my husband. He was sleeping. He had to be at work the next day. That was his first day back after being on paternity leave. And so I was trying not to wake him up and I was trying to just do my own thing and deal with it myself. But it got too unbearable. And he woke up and then Casey actually woke up because she needed to nurse. And I said, I'll get her. And I stood up from the floor. And when I stood up, my legs actually gave out on me and I fell to the floor. That was the first sign of the paralysis starting to spread up my body. And of course, at the time, I didn't know that. And I'm thinking, wow, this is a pretty bad pinched nerve. I think I need to go to the hospital or see a doctor immediately. So I had my husband drop me off. I said, I don't want Casey coming in with me. I don't want you guys to wait with me. I'm sure I'll be fine. I'm sure that they're just going to give me some medicine and you can pick me up in a few hours. So he dropped me off and I kind of just barely walked through the doors. My legs were so weak by that point. And I was able to see a doctor. And I had no idea that that was actually the last time that I would step foot outside for over 3 months.
Wow. Oh my God. I just, I researched a little bit of Guillain-Barre and I didn't get a progression. They didn't give me a timeline. But the fact that it was 12 hours from the time that you felt this little tingle to the point where your legs are buckling and you're falling down in the hospital.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Yeah, it was wild. It came on very quickly. And Guillain-Barre syndrome is very different for every person. It's a wild disorder and it does affect everyone very differently. And some cases are mild. Some people, they get paralysis only up to their waist or they'll only get it in their arms. Some people are in the hospital for a very long time. Some people are in the hospital for a day. Some people are there for a few weeks. So there's just kind of no progression that the doctors can really say. There's no way to predict how it's going to be. So basically what happened is I went in to see a doctor. I was very fortunate that the doctor that I saw recognized, well, to be honest, he actually didn't recognize. He said, I don't know what this is, but it's something serious. And I'm going to get a neurologist to come see you. So I was grateful that he said, I don't know what this is, but someone else will. The second doctor that came to see me, the neurologist, he had seen a case of Guillain-Barre syndrome before, which made it very helpful for diagnosing me, obviously. Because it's such a rare disease, I mean, it only affects about 1 to 2 out of every 100,000. And doctors don't see it very often. So a lot of people get misdiagnosed. They get sent home because maybe it's not coming on as seriously or as quickly. In my case, it was progressing so quickly that they were able to see it happening right in front of their eyes. They would test my strength. They would test my hand strength and my leg strength. And they could literally see it getting it worse and worse as like hour went by. And he said, I think you have Guillain-Barre syndrome. And I remember at the time going, what is that? I don't know what that is. I've never heard of that. Like, is that a disease? Is it is it similar to cancer? Like, that was just where my first mind went to. Then he told me, it's this rare autoimmune disorder and we don't know what's going to happen. It can be mild or severe, but we're going to need to monitor you and you're going to need to be admitted into the hospital. And I remember thinking, I can't be admitted. I have a baby at home. I got to go back home. Just give me the meds and I'm going to go home. And they were like, no, this is very serious and we need you to be admitted and we'll see how things go. You need to call your family. You tell your husband to come here and you can bring your daughter here. And I remember thinking this must be more serious than I think it is. But I still just kind of tried to brush it off and think, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be fine. I'm at the hospital. That's what you do at the hospital. I'm in the right place. They're going to get me better and then I'm going to go home. I remember asking, how long am I going to be here? And they said, we can't tell you that. We don't know. Let's just see what happens. Unfortunately, the paralysis spread so quickly that within 72 hours of that very first tingle, basically a day and a half of being at the hospital, the paralysis spread all the way up my body, affected my legs, arms, and up until it affected my breathing. So I was put on life support in ICU after 72 hours.
Wow. So you actually had paralysis of the airway.
I did, yeah.
So you had to get ventilated. Because that's incredible. Because I'm sure now that you've also probably lived through COVID, that was the big thing, right?
It was.
A ventilator, you might not come off.
Yes.
And at this point, at least, we didn't have that scare. But wow, I mean, that's incredible. I'm going to let you tell us, but what was the actual feeling? What were you feeling through your body as this was going on? Was it nothing or was it like just pure pain?
It was pure pain. So with Guillain-Barre syndrome, it's affecting the nervous system. So GBS is basically, it sees an attack on your body, and that can be anything. It could be the flu, it could be a cold, it could be surgery, it could be childbirth. And so for my case, I had just given birth 3 weeks earlier. I also had a C-section. Those are known triggers for GBS. GBS usually comes on 2 to 4 weeks after some sort of trigger. So that's kind of what they attribute it to be. And then from there, what happens is, normally in a normal body, in a healthy body, your immune system attacks whatever that trigger is, fights it off, and then your body gets better, right? With GBS, it continues to attack, and then it begins to attack the nervous system. And what it does is causes weakness, tingling, pain, and then paralysis, or potentially paralysis in my case. So it was like inflammation basically of every nerve in the body. And it felt like my body was on fire. It felt like I had been run over by a vehicle, fallen off a building. It was unbearable. I was on extreme amounts of narcotics. I was so out of it, but also very aware of my surroundings. So although I was heavily sedated, I was still awake and still knowing what was going on, still in excruciating pain. All of a sudden, I'm rushed to ICU. They're saying, we're going to give you some treatment. We're going to put a breathing tube in your mouth. You're not going to be able to speak. I wake up and I have this tube down my mouth and I can't communicate. I can no longer move my body. I'm in ICU. My entire family, friends, family from out of town, obviously, is rushed to be by my side. And at that point, it was like, this is it. I'm not getting out of here. I'm dying. That's what I had come to the conclusion. I'm on life support and this is kind of it. And everyone is just here to say goodbye.
Oh my God. So you had mentioned that you were in an immense amount of pain, and I can imagine, you're talking about a virus that's literally attacking the nervous system. So every single nerve ending is on fire and it's firing. Did the narcotics, did they help at all, do you think? Did they dulled it a little bit? What did it feel like when you started to, when I'm sure, I'm picturing this in my head, but I'm thinking that you'd have a nurse that come in and they'd push some more because obviously, here would they give us this little button and you ask morphine whenever you want, but you don't have any control. So they got to do it for you.
Yeah. So I went through so much pain for so long. I had to actually have a pain specialist come in. Somebody, I didn't even know that existed, but yeah, there is a person called a pain specialist that specializes in trying to help your pain. So I'm in ICU and I had a nurse by my side almost all the time. Here in Canada, ICU, I'm very, very, very fortunate to have the care that I did. And the nurse was amazing. So I had a 12-hour nurse at a time, and they basically very rarely left my side. So we had pain meds, on a regular rotation. And then I was allowed a top up of a kind of an additional Dilaudid, it was called. And I was allowed that every hour. And
wow, every hour.
It did help for about 5 minutes.
Oh no.
So
that's where I was trying to get to. I want people to understand that you're in the most immense pain possible. And I wanted to hear you say that, okay, when they pressed the button and they got the top up, it was like you got a little bit of relief.
It
lasted 5 minutes.
About 5 minutes. And I remember I would look up at the clock on the wall. It was like this, the clocks that they have at school. Yeah. Exact same, right? It reminded me of my childhood and looking at the clock when you're little when school's out. And I would look at the clock and I would say, oh, I have 55 minutes until I can get another dose. And I would just count down.
Wow. That is nuts. So, okay. So I come from a little bit of a healthcare field. I was an EMT at one point. And I still work in healthcare, but I'm on the tech side. Cause at this point I would be thinking epidural, just shut it down. But did they try that at all? Did you?
No, that was not something that
wasn't
right. No,
one part of the it wasn't something that was amicable with your diagnosis. Okay, yeah, that's cool. That's the first thing that came to my mind.
We did something subcutaneous is what they eventually did. So where I got medication through kind of the fatty parts of my stomach, and that was able to help.
So that would kind of de-stimulate the nerve endings. Yeah. And at least give you a little bit of, oh, wow. So During this time, I'm assuming you're getting regular family coming in. What was going on with your mom and your dad at this point?
So they're there and they are talking to the doctors and they're learning everything they can about GBS and this disease that none of us had ever heard of before. I'm 26 years old. So, I mean, I'm young and I had my whole life ahead of me. And so this was just so sudden and so unexpected. But the doctors were telling my family that, Guillain-Barre syndrome can be very severe. But the good news is that almost everybody gets out of ICU eventually and recovers and gets back to their life. It's just going to take some time and you just have to be patient and you just have to hold on to hope and you just have to keep fighting. And so they did, and they held on to that hope and they were very positive and upbeat and said, you're going to get through this, because that's what the doctors were telling us. Me, on the other hand, I mean, I'm in ICU, I'm on a breathing tube. I'm not seeing any signs of improvement for days and days and then weeks and weeks. So for me, it was very challenging to believe that, I am going to get out of there. Sometimes I thought they were lying to me, that they were just, maybe just trying to keep me alive because they weren't ready to let me go. I just felt like they weren't telling me the truth. I thought I was going to die at any minute. The breathing tube was, you picture yourself underwater when you're just about to run out of air, that feeling. That's what it was like at all times of the day. So it was, I was so afraid because I could still move my head. My head was the one thing that I could move. But I was afraid to move my head because I was afraid that if I even moved, it would just cause the breathing tube to move. And then it would kind of vibrate in my throat and I could feel it and it would cause severe anxiety. And then, of course, my daughter, she's there every day with me. I was so grateful that they said, it's very important that she be here with you. And they would put her on my chest and they would have her in a bassinet right beside me, which was amazing. And it was so awesome that I could have her there. But at the same time, it was so devastating because it was this reminder of, this is what I have and this is what I had at home. And now here I am. And I had wanted to be a mom my whole life. And then here I am and my daughter's 3 weeks old. And now I am dying is what I felt like. And I felt so robbed of my future. I felt so just heartbroken that, everything that I wanted was just taken away from me. And there was no future. There was no hope. There was no reason to keep fighting. And so for a very long time, I just laid there, with no hope in my eyes. And I remember my family just tried to do everything they could to try and cheer me up. And it's so hard when you're dealing with pain. And I was also very ill from all the medication I was on. So I was vomiting up to like 20, 30 times a day. So it was pure hell in ICU. And I had no idea how I was going to get through it.
So I'm going to assume the best part of your day in those days, which, obviously there wasn't a lot of them, was when your husband or your parents would bring Casey in.
Yes.
Would that be fair to say?
Yes, absolutely. And I remember I was just so proud of her. She was like the cutest happiest little baby from day one. And all the nurses would always comment. And I remember just laying in the bed. And when my family would come and they would be walking down the hallway and I could hear all the nurses going, oh, Casey's here. Oh my gosh, she's so cute. And I remember just being so proud and being like, yep, that's my little girl. She was just an angel. She truly was. It was like she knew that, she needed to be on her best behavior. She was just amazing from day one. She slept really well and she never cried. And my family would just do all these little fun things to try to get her to smile, to get her to laugh. And she just was kind of this light in a very, very dark period of time. But there was also a lot of pain there too. They would put her on my bed and they would say, you need to cuddle with Casey. Of course, I couldn't cuddle her back. She would reach out. She would try to wrap her finger around mine and I couldn't feel it and I couldn't reach out to her. And so it was also very, very depressing. and kind of heartbreaking, to go, I'm her mom and I can't do anything. I can't hold her. I can't feed her. I can't be the mom that she deserves. And a lot of times I would say, I don't want her on my bed because I want her to be held by somebody else who can actually take care of her. So it was a very, very depressing time, very dark time. But thankfully, I was able to get in touch. Well, not myself, but the nurses, they saw me at my worst. They saw me losing hope. They kept telling me, you're going to get better. You're going to get better. And I just would shake my head and go, no, I'm not getting better. And so they reached out to a previous GBS survivor that they had actually cared for a few years before. And crazy enough, he was actually in the same ICU room that I was in, the exact same one.
Oh, wow.
And so they had cared for him and he had recovered. So they said, this woman, Holly, she's in ICU. She could really use some motivation. So he walked into the hospital room and he brought his family with him as well. And he had 3 young daughters. They were all, I think, under the age of 4 when he was diagnosed. And he walked right up to my bed and said, I have been where you've been. And I'm here now and I recovered and I made it back to my family and you're going to too. And that was a huge, huge turning point for me. That was like, okay, there is someone else out there that's been through what I have been through and they got out of it. He was a very young dad. He got back to his daughters. Maybe I can too, just maybe. And so that was just like this glimmer of hope that, okay, maybe I can do this.
Awesome. So that was the start. That was your turning point. Before we make that turn and we round that corner, can you give us, and we know a lot of it is you just literally being there in pain. Can you give us like a typical day of those first few the first few weeks, first couple of months?
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hey, challengers. I've got some exciting news to share. As we celebrate our 25th episode of Life Changing Challengers, we're making a big change. Starting August 13th, we'll be releasing new episodes twice a week instead of just once. You can now catch inspiring stories and transformative journeys every Tuesday and Friday. So mark your calendars and get ready for more amazing content coming your way. Thanks for all your support, and let's keep challenging life together.
For sure. It was a Groundhog Day. Every day was the same. So I would wake up and I remember immediately waking up, instant anxiety. Oh, I'm still here. I remember I would dream about living my normal life at home. And then I would wake up and I'd be like, nope, I'm living a nightmare. So it was instant pain, instant anxiety. I would always ask my mom, oh yeah, by the way, also at this point, I was on a ventilator with a breathing tube. After about 10 days, they said, this needs to come out. We need to give you a trach. So they put a hole in my throat and I was given a tracheotomy. So from here, I was able to mouth words and we had a communication board, basically. It was like this 8x10 piece of paper. Everyone just wrote down letters and eventually they wrote down words that I would commonly use and they would point to them. And then I would either blink my eyes or nod my head, depending on how much energy I had. Mm-hmm. And so I would mouth things and that's how I communicated with my family. And the first thing I would always ask is, who's my nurse? And the reason I would ask that is because so many of the nurses, it's ICU, they're dealing with a lot of very traumatic experiences. A lot of, there was a lot of car accidents. There was a lot of very severe elderly people, a lot of people that were sedated or in comas. With Guillain-Barre Syndrome, people are awake and aware and there for a long time. And they didn't necessarily know how to care for me. They didn't know how to handle the pain. They didn't realize that I literally felt like I was on fire. I was so hot that I couldn't have blankets on me. The blankets basically felt like they were suffocating me. made me feel too hot. They made me in pain. They made me itchy, just everything. So I would basically be there, just laying there. I would have 15 different cold cloths all over parts of my body because I just felt like I was on fire. And that was the inflammation in my nerves. And then I'm nauseous, and I'm dealing with a lot of pain, and just asking, I want a nurse that has dealt with me before. Because whenever I had a nurse that had been in my room before, they were a lot more understanding, a little bit more comforting. And so that was always my first question whenever I woke up: who's my nurse? And, some of them were absolutely incredible. Even if they didn't have experience with GBS, some people are just destined to be nurses, and they're just incredible to what they do. And they would, hold my hand, and they would get me my pain meds, and they would try to lift my spirits. Some days they would do my makeup, and they would try to brush out my hair, and they would just do all these little things. And so we would try to just pass the time. And that's so hard when you're in ICU and you can't do anything. So, my mom tried to get us into a routine. She would brush my teeth every morning. She would wash my face. I would get a sponge bath from the nurses, which is basically like a cloth that they would just wipe me down. That was my highlight of the day, because it actually cooled me down and made me feel a little bit better. I would get my, my narcotic injection, and it would help in that moment. So I would kind of feel all right for like I said, like an hour. And then from there, usually after all my meds, I would get 15, 20 different pills that would be basically chopped up into a liquid format and then squeezed into a feeding tube in my stomach. So that's how I fed. And it made me extremely, extremely nauseous. So from there, that's usually when I would get sick. They would actually lift me out of bed once a day. That didn't happen until probably 3 weeks in, or a month, almost a month in, I think. But, when you're lying down, your heart is resting on your lungs, and so it's putting pressure. So my lung was actually collapsing. So they said, she's got to get out of bed. So they had this hoist that would lift my body up into the air and move me over into this big lazy boy chair. And it was the most excruciating, painful thing, just having everything touch me and move me. And I would be hyperventilating, and they got me on Ativan, and I would get in the chair, and I would be like, okay, I just want to get out of this room. I just want to go do something else. So they would actually take me through the hospital halls. Sometimes they would take me outside. I would sit outside, and I would spend 10 minutes outside, and I would go, yeah, no, I don't want to be here. I just want to go back to my room, because I'd be in so much pain. I'd be in so much discomfort on my back. There'd be people walking in and out of the hospital. They would do a double take of me. I literally looked like I was dying, and I often had my newborn baby on my lap, because my family's trying to, give me that connection, and people would just stare at me. And so I would just be like, no, just bring me back to my room. And I would go back to the room and go, I can't believe I want to be back here, but I do. And then I'd be in bed and go, I just want to get out of here.
Yeah.
And it was just so torture. Yeah. And and we'd watch TV, and my mom would read me messages that people would reach out to me. In my city, I was in my 20s, and I had a newborn, and that's a very devastating, heartbreaking story. So it made the news, and there was a lot of people reaching out to me, and a lot of even strangers, people that had gone through GBS before, reaching out, messaging my family, even stopping by the hospital to try to see me. Yeah, it was quite wild, but it was very motivating to feel, that love and that support of people all over just rooting for me. And my mom would read me these messages and go, there's so many people fighting alongside with you, and you're not alone, and you may not feel strong, but we're here. We're your strength right now while you have none.
Oh man. So how long was it before you finally started to see a light when did things start to finally calm down to where you started feeling like, whoa, hang on a second, something's a little bit better?
So to be honest, that happened about 6 weeks in. My fingertip moved. So that was the first movement that came back, which is very fascinating that, that was that first symptom. And then that's where it first came back. Same finger. And my family was ecstatic. They were like, oh my God, this is the sign. This is it. You're going to get better. But in that moment, I was literally vomiting and in so much pain and crying that it was hard to get excited over a fingertip moving. So I wouldn't say that, that was the pivotal moment for me. It was certainly for my family. That was a sign that I was getting better. It wasn't for me, though. But as time went on, I did get better. I wasn't always able to see that, but I was. And, I wrote about it in my book where I talk about the progression that I went through. And when I go through that, I'm able to say like, wow, every day I did show signs of improvement in some way. But for me, I would say it was probably almost 2 months before I really started to believe that, maybe I'm going to get out of here. So when you're on a breathing tube, you're on a ventilator, you're surviving because of that machine. And so no matter what, even though I'm paralyzed, I can't do anything, I can't move my body, priority number one is my breathing. And so they said, you can't get out of ICU until you get off the ventilator. So you have to do these trials off the ventilator, and you're going to do them for 15, 30 seconds at a time. And gradually we're going to wean you off the ventilator. So, the priority number one is let's deal with that. So every day we would start doing those. And I remember the first time that I did it, I truly felt like I was going to die. I was running out of air. I was hyperventilating. I was panicking. I'm crying and I'm going, I can't do this. Put me back on. So they put me back on and they said, okay, you lasted 15 seconds. And I remember going 15 seconds, like, hey, how am I going to last a day? How am I going to breathe on my own? I can't do this. I can barely last 15 seconds. And they said, we're just going to keep going. We're just going to keep drying one day at a time. So I kept drying. And I remember, I think it was like the third or fourth time I made it to 15 minutes. And my family was so happy and everyone was so happy. But it had taken some time to get to those 15 minutes. And I remember again thinking, 15 minutes, like how long is it going to take for me to learn how to breathe for 48 minutes, which is how long I needed to be able to last before they would consider taking out the trach. And it just felt so impossible to me. And everyone said, you're making progress. You are making progress. And I see that now. I'm able to look back on it now. But at the time, it didn't feel like it. And I remember just feeling so hopeless and saying like, I don't even know why I'm trying. I just can't see how I'm ever going to be able to do this. The nurses saw that. They said, we got to get Kit back in here. Kit's the name of the guy that's had GBS previously. So he comes back in and he brought this sign with him that time. And it was actually a sign that one of his nurses, who was also my nurse at the time, she had made this sign for him and she had put it on his wall. And he said, you need this more than I do. I'm putting it on your wall. And they used the hospital tape to tape it up because we didn't have regular tape. And I remember staring at it, said, courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's the quiet voice at day's end saying, I will try again tomorrow.
Oh, that's amazing.
And I literally just I bawled because everybody was telling me, oh my God, Holly, you are so strong. You are going to get through this. You're such a fighter. You're a mom and you're going to fight to get back to your baby and you can do this. And I remember feeling almost disappointed in myself and frustrated with everyone because I didn't feel like a fighter. I was laying there at times just hopeless and not believing that I was going to get better. And so I felt like a phony. I felt like you guys think that I'm strong, but I'm not strong because I'm actually at times just praying, just take me away. Just let me just let me die already because I can't handle this pain anymore. So when I read that sign, it was like, courage doesn't always roar. You don't have to feel strong. You don't have to feel powerful. You can still just be strong and you can still just try to get through one day at a time, even 1 hour at a time. And you can just try again tomorrow. And so I said, that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to keep trying again tomorrow. So every day we would go off the ventilator a little bit longer. And every day was a challenge. And there were so many times where I would cry afterwards and go, I don't think I can do this. But I would just say, I'll try again tomorrow. And I would do it again tomorrow. And the next time I would last a little bit longer and a little bit longer. It would get a little bit easier. And eventually I was able to last 3 hours. That was another huge turning point. And I think it was at that point that I was like, you know what? If I can do 3 hours, then maybe I can do this. And that's kind of when I knew that, I am going to get out of here and I am going to get back to my baby. Of course, around this same time, everything was kind of coming back at the same time. So the pain was diminishing and the weakness was diminishing. So I was able to kind of lift my hands up a little bit. I was very, very weak, but I could start to move things again. So that was another huge turning point. It was like, okay, there are signs that I might be able to get through this. And we figured out a way to, prop up the baby bottle on my hand, and I could just put the bottle into my daughter's mouth. And it was like, okay, I finally have purpose in my life. I finally can actually be her mom and do something with her. So those are some of the most joyous moments that I have from ICU is, having her on my lap and feeding her and being off the ventilator and just being able to feel my own breath. And it was so challenging, even while I was doing it, having that feeling of every single breath, but still, just saying, I will try again tomorrow and I'm going to try again tomorrow. And eventually I was able to last 48 hours. They took out the trach. After a couple of days of being able to breathe completely on my own, I left ICU after 70 days in ICU.
So you're talking it was basically 10 weeks.
Yeah.
That this whole span. That's sometimes as parents, you probably think that 10 weeks isn't a lot. But when you're stuck in bed with pain and with this helplessness, your one joy is to see your daughter, that's a lot of time. It could feel forever, I can imagine.
It truly did. It felt like I couldn't even remember I could remember what life was like, but it felt like such an eternity ago. It felt like I had been there for years. Every day just felt like it was the same. It was wild.
Yeah. It's crazy. Okay, so you finally get out of ICU. You're breathing on your own. Obviously, you still have some pain.
I still had some mild pain, but not too bad, actually, which was wonderful. Obviously, when you're not dealing with pain, then you feel like, you can actually focus on getting better. I was still very, very weak, though. So, and that was a little bit hard for me. I was like, okay, I'm better. I'm out of ICU and I can get back to my life. But then it was like, no, you're still paralyzed and you can't feed yourself and you can't. Your daughter's on your bed, but you still can't hold her in your arms. You still really can't function. And so it was like, okay, I still have a really long way to go. I was, like I said, the pain was a lot better. So I was off the meds. I wasn't on as many. So I wasn't as, out of it. I was much more aware of what was going on, much more awake. I wasn't sleeping as often. I'm in basically a neurology ward, and I'm the youngest person on the ward. Everyone else is stroke, mostly stroke victims. And I'm just kind of stuck in bed, and physiotherapy came to visit me and said, we're going to get you out of here. We're going to get you back to walking. And I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I just learned how to breathe on my own. And that kind of sparked this fire in me because I truly did not believe I was going to be able to breathe on my own. Promised myself I would try. And then I overcame that. And it was like, wow, you actually can overcome hard things. So I didn't know how I was going to learn how to walk again, but I was like, you know what, if I can learn how to breathe, then I can do anything. So I started physiotherapy, and I started with so many different little exercises that I had to do. Things like, just trying to lift my leg. I couldn't lift my leg for many, many weeks, but they said, just try, just keep trying and try to, activate those muscles, get things moving. My hands started coming back as well. So then I had to, use putty and different little hand exercises. I had to fasten buttons and just open jars. There was just so many little different activities I had to do. I remember I had to stack these cones, and it was so hard to do. And there were so many times that I would cry and just say, I just want my life back. And why is this so hard? And I can't do this. But I just kept promising myself, just try again tomorrow. And that's what I would do. And gradually over time, those small little improvements got better and better until eventually, I could hold my daughter and I could pick her up. I was moved to a rehab hospital. It was quite a while actually after. So I think it would have been after about 4 months I was moved to a rehab hospital. And that's where I learned how to walk again and strengthen my legs enough. I started with a walker and had to, walk this hallway. And I remember standing at the one end and looking down the hallway going, oh my God. And it was so challenging to take those steps. And it just felt like the hardest thing in the world. But I did them. And over time, my legs got a little bit stronger. I progressed to using a cane. I was eventually discharged. I got out of the hospital before I was completely recovered, because it's obviously a lot better to continue recovering at home. They actually let me out a little bit early because they knew that my daughter was at home, and they said, for your mental health, we think it's better that you're at home with your daughter. So I went home to finish my recovery there. I stayed at home on the couch because I couldn't do stairs. I couldn't get up the stairs. I was in a wheelchair for a couple of months. And that really changed my perspective on a lot of things. You don't realize what you have until you've lost it. And so to be in a wheelchair and to not be able to just get up and walk and do things was life-changing, especially when I was able to walk again. So I started with taking walks around the block with my walker. And then I realized, my daughter's stroller gives me just as much balance. So I would use the stroller. And so I would go for a walk around the block. And I was so slow, but I kept going. And eventually I was able to get rid of the stroller and get rid of the walker and walk completely on my own.
Oh, wow. What an incredible story. I just want to step back real quick. So from the onset to you being discharged out of ICU to a normal room was about 4 months?
From in ICU.
Onset to getting out of ICU.
To getting out of ICU was 2.5 months.
Okay, so that was 2.5 months there. And then it was 4 months. It was 4 months from onset before you got into the rehab hospital.
Yeah.
And then you were in the rehab hospital for
about 3 weeks.
For about 3 weeks, or almost a month there.
Yeah.
So we're talking about 4 or 5. So we're talking about 6 months before you got home.
126 days.
Wow. I mean, that's nuts. Just thinking about this, the fact that you had this tingle in your finger within 72 hours, you were on a respirator, and then it took 126 days to get you back home, and you still weren't done.
Yeah.
How
people don't realize it, but I was going through this experience, but my daughter she was a newborn, and then she's growing up. When I got home, she was 6 months old.
So how long? I don't want to say normal. I don't want to say that. I think that's kind of a bad word. It does not. I don't think there is a normal here. But let's say to So we're talking about 6 months before you got home, 126 days. Then to the point where, let's just say that you could make dinner, do the dishes, walk around the block, hold your child and feed it as like a normal-ish.
I would say probably about 7 months before it was, normal-ish, where I could help out. I was dealing with a lot of fatigue, and after the recovery, I went through a lot of pain, and then the pain disappeared, and then it actually came back in a different way. And it's nerve pain. It's the damaged nerves, basically. And so as I became more active, the worse it got. So I couldn't do a lot. So, I mean, I was able to, I could cook and I could clean and I could go for walks and I could live my life, but then I paid for it. And so I was off work for almost 2 years, and I was just at home, just recovering and very fortunate. I wanted to be at home anyways with my daughter. So it was wonderful bonding time. And it was great therapy for me to practice lifting her up and doing those things. I continued with outpatient therapy for quite a while, probably about 6 months, where I went to see a physiotherapist and did all these different exercises because I was still very, very weak. I mean, you wouldn't see it, like you wouldn't notice it by looking at me, but I couldn't. I had trouble with lifting things. I had trouble with getting up the stairs. I had trouble with walking long periods. I would just get so exhausted that I would need to lay down, and I was sleeping a lot. But I would say it was about a year, a little over a year, before I truly started to be like, okay, I feel like my life is actually where I was before.
Wow. And that's a long year,
Mm-hmm.
Like, sometimes we think that, oh my God, it's June. We're almost halfway through 2024. What happened? But for you, in that year, 2011 to 12, that had to feel like an eternity.
It did. It truly did.
Oh my God. So, wow. That's amazing. So you said you ended up not working for what? This was 2 years before you finally got back to work.
Yep.
What did that feel like? Your first day at work after going through all of this?
It was actually amazing. It was kind of like the last piece of the puzzle. It was, I was doing everything else. It took so many different things that, to give me my life back. I had to get my driver's license. I actually had to retake it because of everything that I went through. So, that was one step. And then the first time that I was actually, able to be at home alone with my daughter, because before that, there was a lot of times where, I couldn't physically hold her or physically care for her. So I couldn't be alone with her for a lot of time. So that was another step. And then the first time that I, went out in public, the first time I went to a restaurant, the first time that I walked the mall, the first time I went to a football game, like there was all these little things. And so work was the last piece of the puzzle that was like, okay, I'm finally back to work and back to getting to my life. And it feels like I am here and finally made it.
Oh my God. So I'm just wondering if this happens to you, because I'm thinking about what you went through, and I know I'm way off in my head. I know it's much, much worse. But just to give you, because I can't even imagine it. But when you talk to your family about this, do you kind of go like, okay, that was B GBS and then C GBS?
100%. Yes.
Oh, okay.
I totally view my life as before and after, before GBS and after GBS.
Yes, you're just right. Okay.
Yeah.
That's the first. I was just like, oh my God, she probably, because it sounds, when you said the firsts, right? The first football game, the first restaurant. That's all I'm thinking about is, oh my God, it's like she's doing it all over again.
Oh yeah. It felt like I was all in a way like reborn, right? Like just like a new baby, and that was kind of motivating for me when I was going through it. Was that like I had to learn how to eat, I had to learn how to feed myself, brush my hair and teeth, all that kind of stuff. And I remember the nurses saying like, your daughter's doing the same thing. She's learning how to do all this stuff too. So it was like, okay, she's doing it. If she can do it, then I can do it. And I had to be reborn, and I had to relearn how to do all this stuff. And, I've got this scar on my neck now from the breathing tube. And it is funny to look back on pictures, and it's like pre-GBS, before I had the scar, before everything that had happened. And then it's after GBS and who I am now. And I mean, it changed me so drastically. Once I was home, it was like, okay, I was in my 20s. I was so naive to all the diseases out there, all the health issues that people deal with. When I was in ICU, and, I saw and heard a lot of different things that people were dealing with. And it was just like, wow, you are so naive when you don't know somebody, or you're not going through any health issues. You take for granted your health, for sure. And so once I was healthy again, and I was feeling good, and I could do things, I felt so grateful that I could hold a bottle and feed my daughter. I remember being so excited that I could change her diaper, and just being so excited that I could play outside with her and go for a walk with her. And it was just like this huge, huge sense of gratitude that I don't think I would ever had I not gone through what I did. And it just made me appreciate being a mom so much more. And it really gave us this very unique bond that, again, I don't think we would have had we not gone through it. And so I've been able to look at that as a blessing. I went through so much pain. I went through so much heartbreak. I went through the most pain that I could ever think I would experience. Times where I didn't think I was going to make it out alive, but I wouldn't change it for the world, because it truly made me who I am. It changed my view on life. It made me realize how short life is. We got to go after the things that we want to do now, because life can change literally in the blink of an eye. Within 72 hours, I was completely paralyzed on life support, and it's made me really view the world differently.
As you were talking about being, grateful that you're able to do this stuff, I've constantly been trying, they have the whole thing, the gratitude journal, right? That's like the thing that's been going on. And a lot of people have told me that when you come from a place of gratitude, that things start to look brighter. And I've done this gratitude journal, and I feel like I'm writing the same things down all the time.
Totally.
Like, I'm grateful for my family, and I'm grateful for this. And you know what? I think you have taught me, at least me personally, and hopefully some people that are listening to this, that, there's so much more to be grateful for. I'm grateful. I'm all about, I was all about, pen to paper, right? Putting pen to paper, not just a keyboard. I'm not doing it on a keyboard. I'm doing it on pen to paper. And I'm like, where I'm thinking about, I'm grateful for my family. I'm grateful that they're healthy. I'm grateful for the sun that comes up, and blah, blah, blah. Now, talking to you, I'm like, I'm grateful that I can hold the pen to write this gratitude journal. I'm down to that. So listen, folks, that's something that you need to take away from this: the ability that within 72 hours you could be completely paralyzed for, and not be able to have any kind of normalist life for a year, if that, and then it's still a struggle. Let's go on post, the post GBS. And where did you start thinking about putting all this down to paper and coming up with her book, by the way, Life Support, Surviving Guillain-Barre Syndrome, A Mother's Story of Hope and Recovery by Holly Francis. And we will have a link to that in the show notes. But when did the idea for the book come out?
It's actually a funny story. It was quite quickly. So I think it was about 4 months after I had got out of the hospital. I went back to ICU to visit my nurses and doctors and say hi and walk in there. And it was incredible. I looked obviously completely different. I looked like I was dying when I was in ICU. So I walked in there, and I was with Casey, who by that point was much older. And so they didn't even recognize us. They're like, "Hi, who are you here to visit?" And I'm like, "It's me, it's Holly." And they were just blown away. They couldn't even believe it. And it was incredible. It was so joyous and just amazing to thank the nurses for you being my rock on those really challenging days. But I was talking to one of my respiratory therapists. He was one of the guys that, dealt with my breathing, and he was there quite a bit, and was very, very supportive and helpful for our family, and gave us a lot of insight into GBS. We learned so much from him. And we were reminiscing about the times, and it was crazy that we could actually look back and laugh at some of the things that I went through in ICU. Like, it was like, oh, do you remember when this happened? And you were hyperventilating. Oh my God, we were panicking. And we and I remember we're like laughing about it. We're like, I can't believe we're laughing about it now. But we did. And the doctor was like, you know what? You went through so much. It is insane what you went through in such a short amount of time. You could practically write a book about it. And instantly when he said it, I was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to write a book about it. And so that's what I did. And I was very fortunate because my mom, she had documented everything in a calendar every day, basically, of, every update. So everything that was going on. And the reason she did that is because she wanted to show me that I was improving. So when I would be like, Mom, why am I not getting better? I'm not getting better. How can I get through this? When are things going to turn around? She would flip the calendar over and say, look here, this is the first time that you moved your head again. And like, this is the first time you were able to move your hand. And your blood pressure is better and your heart rate is better. So that's what she used that calendar for. And so I had it all documented, and it would obviously spark these memories. She also took a lot of videos and pictures, which you've probably seen on my website. And I remember at the time thinking, like, why are you videoing me? This is not the time to video me. But she was doing it because she had seen Kit's journey, basically from his recovery from beginning to end, and she wanted to do the same. She thought that it would be helpful. And I'm so glad she did, obviously, because I was able to piece back everything that I went through, and I could actually see it for my own eyes on video. The first time that I breathed on my own again, the first time that I was able to use my hand again. And so I just started writing, and I wrote, and it came out. And from there, my life drastically changed. At that point, I remember just wanting to find other people that had gone through GBS, because when you're in ICU and the doctors and nurses are telling you, you're one of 1 to 2 out of every 100,000 people. You're the only person in this hospital that has it. I've never seen a case before. Many nurses had never dealt with a GBS patient before. It's very isolating. You feel very alone. People are telling you you're going to get better, and you're saying, you're not the one in my shoes. You can't possibly understand. So to me, I just wanted to find these other GBS survivors, and I did. This was just, when Facebook was started to get really, really big, and I found all these other people through hashtags, Guillain-Barre Syndrome. There was so many people around the world that had gone through what I had gone through, and some very similar cases, some very mild cases, some people who had given birth, and it was just like, oh my gosh, these are my people. Like, these people totally get it. And so I wrote my book. I put out my book. I actually made a YouTube video of my journey with the videos of that my mom had made, put it out there. And from there, it just kind of skyrocketed. And I had all these people from around the world reaching out to me going, I had GBS. I didn't even know that there was other people out there like you. Thank you for giving me hope. There's people asking me questions. How do I get through this? There's people, my family member is in ICU right now. We thought that they were going to die, but your story has given us hope. And doctors reaching out to me going, thank you so much for educating people about GBS and showing people what it is and what it does to people. And it was just like this light bulb moment for me. It was like, you know what? I know why I had GBS. I had it for a reason, and that was to show other people that they can get through it.
That is what we all hope that people would do with a journey like that. Mm-hmm. Taking in such a debilitating, disease and coming out on the other side. So what are you doing with the community now? I see that you became a professional, a certified trainer. Are you using that to spark more awareness and to say that, okay, this is what to do afterwards to keep yourself.
Yeah.
How's that working?
So basically, once I had recovered, I remember I was still weak, still going through physiotherapy, recovered, but still not 100%. And I had met a physiotherapist that said, like, let's get you back to 100%. And I was like, well, I'm pretty close. I don't think I need to do any further. And he said, no, don't you want to be better than what you are? And he really pushed me. And I went through kind of this extensive program, and it came out of it basically stronger than I was before going through GBS. And I realized, if you put in the work and you put in a lot of the effort and the time, that you can get stronger. And so I had a lot of people reaching out to me, asking me questions. What did you do? I started exercising regularly. I never exercised before GBS. It was not part of my life. It became such a huge part of my lifestyle. I realized, it not only helps with my weakness, it helps me just feel better overall. And I got into the best shape of my life. And so I was sharing my story, and I created this basically a Facebook page called Holly After GBS, started connecting with people all around the world, and people were asking me all these exercise questions. And I would answer what I knew, but I said, I'm not an expert. And gradually over time, I said, actually, I need to learn more. I want to learn more. So I got certified. I actually worked with clients for quite a while, a lot of GBS survivors, helped them just regain strength, showed them how to exercise in a very efficient way and how to, just very safe way. There's so many different things that I learned along the way. Exercise doesn't have to be this like all or nothing. It doesn't have to be like, oh, you're running on a treadmill, you're in the gym working out as hard as possible. It can be you're sitting on a couch, standing up and sitting back down and doing that 10 times in a row. And maybe it's hard, but that's going to help you get stronger. And when you're gradually doing that over time, you're getting stronger and stronger and regaining that strength. So I've built this little community in the GBS world. I found all these incredible people that have gone through what I have or very similar. We all obviously share this very unique bond that most people, that they don't ever go through something like we do. I joined the GBS CIDP Foundation, which is a foundation here in Canada. I joined first as a volunteer because I said, how can I help? How can I get more involved? And one of the first things that surprisingly, that I wanted to do was I wanted to visit people in the hospital the way that Kit had done for me. So I said, I want to go visit those patients that are in ICU that don't believe that they're going to get out of here, and walk in and show them that there is hope. So I started doing that for a long time. And then gradually I worked my way up to be on the board of directors. And it's such a huge part of my life now. And I do, we do awareness events, we do conferences. I've been to the States quite a bit because the US also has a US chapter. And so I just get to meet patients from all over the world. And it's just been life-changing.
Oh, wow. And let me tell you, that is the best story ever. That's the best way to come out of this. As we start to wrap up here, I have one question because, and maybe it's a little personal and you don't have to answer if you don't want to. But you've mentioned it 2 or 3 times now, and watching the videos and stuff. And I see that your husband was there with your, at the time with Casey and stuff. What was there major changes because you were, kind of gone, not really being able to be around? It was a year, and then all of a sudden, before you were able to really get going again, it's a little bit over a year. Was there things that changed at home at that point because of you being gone and because of the stress level of dealing with a loved one and going through that?
I wouldn't say that it was from that, actually. It wasn't from the stress. My husband at the time was absolutely incredible. He was very supportive. He was there every single day by my side. He was a huge reason why I overcame what I did. And he was an incredible father. Obviously, he had to be the one that was taking care of Casey while she was at home. Once I recovered, it was a really great time when I first recovered, but gradually over time, I was just such a different person, and I think he was as well. What we went through just changed us both very, very drastically. From then, we had our daughter. We had a 2-year-old at that point is when we separated. And so it was a couple of years after going through GBS, but what we went through, it had changed us so much that we were just different people and we viewed the world very differently. And after going through what I had gone through, it was like, life is very short and we need to be happy, and happiness needs to be number one. And so we did separate and divorced a few years after that. But, life is what it is. And I believe that everything does happen for a reason. And he is still a huge part of my life, and very involved in my daughter's life as well. And we co-parent amazing. I've actually gone on to remarry. I actually just got remarried 3 weeks ago now.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah. So
fantastic.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, so you would say is that the experience changed you, or you made some changes in the way you looked at life, and that life just wasn't compatible anymore.
Yeah.
But I give him kudos because he was there for you the whole time, no matter how much he felt like he was changing. And I still give him kudos that he's still a wonderful father to Casey. And especially now, I know that, I remember my niece, she flipped a switch at like 12. At 12, she flipped a switch. There was this, and I watched her. We were in Universal Orlando. I watched the switch. All of a sudden, she was this girl. She was a gymnast. She was like, yeah, and smiling. And then with a switch, all of a sudden, she's talking back to her mom. And I was like, again. And we all, like, our mouths dropped. And after that, it was like a terror. So, and I was like, and unfortunately, she, didn't have a full-time father at the time. And I'm like, this is the time she needs a full-time father. Yeah. So I'm hoping that you're not going through that, or at least it's tamed.
I'm so blessed. Casey is such a joy. She's definitely turning into a teenager. She is 13 now, and it's wild because she's actually taller than me. It's so crazy to see, just to look back on, where we came from and that little baby that she was in the hospital to who she is now, and how quickly time goes, right? It doesn't feel like it was that long ago for me that I was in the hospital, but she's 13 years old and becoming a young woman now.
Oh, that is fantastic. Is she, does she already have it in her head that she's going to become a physician and she's going to solve this problem?
No, I think she's got a little bit of trauma from the hospital, which is interesting. I mean, obviously she doesn't remember. She was a newborn. She was a little baby. But she does find it really, really challenging to, look at the videos, look at the pictures. We've tried to read my book a little bit, and she's just not there yet. So
okay, well, kudos to you to being a great mom like you are, to recognize that and say that, not to force that on her.
Yep.
Let her do her thing.
Yeah.
But that's amazing. And yes, so I mean, I'm not part of that community, but as somebody that has witnessed traumatic episodes of things, and I'll tell you about that in a minute, maybe when we get offline here, an idea. But thank you. You know what I mean? It's people like you putting the experience that you had and turning it into a positive to help all the other people that are, in this case, going through, bouts with GBS or coming out of GBS, or because of what they've written in your book, they recognize early, that maybe this is happening to them. So kudos to you. Thank you for doing what you do. I look for these people. This is why the podcast, is the right thing for people, and why I do what I do, because it's life-changing, and you had the challenge and you got through it. And instead of wallowing in it or saying, okay, it's part of my life, I'm done, you've made something with it and you're helping people. Oh, no, it's okay.
Excuse me.
Yeah, no problem. So thank you so much. So for everybody else, as we wrap this up, I just want to say, remember her book is called Life Support, Surviving Guillain-Barre Syndrome, A Mother's Story of Hope and Recovery. Again, her name is Holly Francis. Look for that. It's on Amazon. I'm going to have a link to it. And she also has a website, hollyaftergbs.com. And where else would be the best way for people to, hook up with you and, ask you some of those questions?
Yeah, so the website's kind of the easiest way to find everything, but I am on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube as well. So just kind of whatever genre you prefer.
All right. So is that enough for people to slide into DMs?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. There you go, folks. Hey, again, Holly Francis, it has been an honor and a privilege. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me and just giving me the opportunity to share my story and to bring awareness to GBS. So many people don't understand what it is and what it's like to go through. Even like nurses I talk to are just so grateful that I'm bringing awareness to share. Even for them, they're like, you know what, I've never seen a case before. I didn't realize what you go through. And that's what my book, I think, is great. It really goes through the progression and really explains what it is. So thank you for having me on the show. It was great.
No, thank you. And for the rest of you, go ahead and hit the share button and show it to other people in your family, any way that you think that would benefit from this. And if you really liked it, which I can't see how you could not like this episode between me and Holly, come on, go ahead and, leave a star rating, give a little comment, tell us how it was, give us some honest feedback on any ways that I can improve the episodes. And with that being said, we'll see you in the. Well, that wraps up another episode of Life Changing Challengers. I'm your host, Brad Minus, saying thank you for joining us on this journey of transformation. If today's stories inspired you, please take a moment to review, share, and follow us on your favorite podcast platform. Your support helps us reach more listeners and create an even bigger impact. Remember, every challenge is a chance to grow. Until next time, keep pushing, keep challenging, and never stop pursuing your extraordinary.